welcome Phoebe.
Thanks, Ajay.
How are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
Very well, very well. So I think let's start with you doing an intro about who you are to our audience. But for our audience, we've started this whole thing called Knowledge Series, and it's basically interviewing industry experts, but also from an angle of cybersecurity, right? So we recently had one with an insurance advisor about how cyber insurance is impacting the industry. And today we have you from public relations and communication, which is a very close topic to my heart. And when companies have data breaches and they get known in the media, I think communication becomes a very key aspect. So give us a quick background about yourself and introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll get into it. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So my name is Phoebe Netto, and I'm the founder of Pure Public Relations. We actually take care of the public relations for StickmanCyber, and we deal with anything to do with communication and perception. So we want to show what makes a business great, not tell. So it's different to advertising. This is about your reputation and how you engage and communicate with people. So when it comes to cybersecurity, for example, there's an issues management aspect to what we do, and how do you communicate well about that to all the different audiences. And then there's a media relations aspect of how is your business presented in the media, if it's there at all, and if it is, making sure it's positive.
So when you say, is all public relationship meant to be only positive? Like when there is a data breach, obviously there is an impact to the business, their customers, and also can you give us some distinction between internal communication and external communication, please?
Yes. So there's all these different stakeholders or audiences that you need to communicate with. Ideally, you'll be communicating with them on a regular basis. You've got internal communications, that's your staff. And they're the front line of your business, really. They're the first thing that a lot of people see about your business. So it's really important that they are presenting you well, and they know what messages you want them to communicate. And then you've got your ideal customers, your existing customers, anyone else that may be affected by your business or by a breach. And then really savvy businesses think beyond that to other audiences like the media, like government, like referrers, and make sure that they've got a good reputation with those audiences and that they're communicating regularly with them. So we can get our clients in the media, and we can also help keep them out of the media when needed, or reduce a negative impact. And the businesses that have a crisis and handle it really well, one of the key indicators of them managing a situation like that well is if they were already proactively communicating with those audiences, because then they've got a reputation that's strong to start with. They've established some trust and a connection. They've got those communications channels well used. It makes it much easier when something goes wrong to use that as a foundation point to help remedy it.
Yeah, over the last 16 years, I have followed a number of data breaches, right? Both local, international, government, non-government, not-for-profit, for-profit, big corporations, small corporations. But one of the key things I've noticed is the ones who've had it really bad also took it up on themselves to ensure that both their internal, external, and when I say internal, it's also their extended partner network were constantly kept in the loop, right? Many years ago, about almost 15 years ago or 14 years ago, there was a payment company in the US, a very large one, who had a massive data breach. It ran into millions of credit card data, which was stolen by hackers. And they had actually a hotline you could dial into. Every Monday morning, the CEO would give an update to whoever wants to, including media, could listen. So it was managed really well in terms of, how to communicate, what to communicate, not keeping people in the dark. They had a dedicated website landing page where people could go get information. They had a separate channel for media if media wanted information. Because what we tell clients is, you can, what is preparing for the worst case, right? Because many organizations who have not experienced a data breach don't see the importance of communication. and then when the breach actually happens, and they're like, oh, what do we do now?
Yes.
So have you seen, or can you give us, even if it's not cyber, but any case study or something in terms of a crisis? What are the steps before and after, right, in terms of crisis management from a communication and a public relations standpoint, please?
Yes. Similar to what you do, there is a lot of preparation and prevention involved. So from a public relations perspective, that's making sure that we anticipate what some of those potential issues are going to be and prepare for those in advance, hoping that we never need to use that. So that's going to be what we call a holding statement. It's a statement that you literally hold on to in case you need to use it. And that's prepared for media, and we can prepare that for a number of scenarios so that if something happens, you really just need to update it and it's ready to go because time matters. Then also statements for all the other different audiences, because each person has a different need. There are different next steps required for each audience. So for example, your staff, they need to know what's happened, but they also need to be given tools on how they are to manage their customer communications, because concerned customers are going to call them, not the communications person or the boss. So they need to be given those tools. So they need something different, and they can be given more information than what you might give an external person.
Okay.
So we put together all the different communications in writing for all these different audiences. You should also have a bit of a chart that says when this happens, this is who is allowed to speak to the media. This is who needs to be contacted when, so that you know what to enact when it happens, because you do not want your receptionist answering questions with limited knowledge, for example, and causing more chaos than is needed. You do not want somebody sending out an email to their clients that hasn't matched up with the other communications, so that you need a really clear pathway of what to enact and who can do it. And something so simple as making sure that you've got easy access to the logins for all of your communications channels so that you can move quickly. You wouldn't believe how something so simple can add hours to a process if you don't have it ready to go beforehand.
Sure. So it's something like what I'm hearing is, we do something called instant response playbooks, right? Which is very technical in nature, obviously,
Yes.
Who to call, what's the escalation levels, what's the response time to a certain kind of incident, who are all the other connected parties.
Yes.
We do whole flow charts around it. So it's kind of
Very
mapping
much
into
the same.
what we do, but more so from a PR and communication
Yes.
standpoint. That's really, really cool to even, begin to, envisage that that's the level of detail one needs to go into.
Yes, I mean, we have clients where we do this on a much more stripped back basis, where we have a few simple statements because they're a small enough team that they'll come straight to us and we can manage it.
Correct.
But for the larger organizations, or where there are multiple partners or customers, they do need to have that ready, because what you want to avoid is chaos.
Yep.
What you also want to avoid is silence, because people fill the silence with their own assumptions, usually negative, and their own misunderstandings and ideas, and you want to be able to control the message, and you don't want people filling a void of silence with their own negative assumptions. You want to be the confident, calm, in control person that tells them what you want them to hear, what they need to understand, and if you do that consistently, they're going to know you are the go-to for information, you're the trusted one, to the point where they can believe that you're trustworthy enough to believe that you will resolve this in their best interest, and they won't jump ship. They'll stick with you after the crisis if you handle it well.
Yeah, so in leadership and management, there's a very powerful statement which says, you're not judged by when things are going well, you're judged by when things are not going well, and how you deal with that situation at that point in time. And I've worked with many service providers and many clients, where and I've seen organizations who are not clients of ours who kind of try to put things under the carpet, especially when things are not going very well. Not just from a cyber standpoint, it could be a financial breakdown, or it could be mass redundancies of staff, they don't tell the actual story behind it, and then all these assumptions and today, like 20 years ago, social media wasn't as powerful, but today you could just put one line statement,
one tweet,
and then that's it. It can just catch wildfire. Like just recently, I saw some staff put up he literally wrote something, scribbled on a big piece of paper, and he said, I was let go because I shared my views. And that's become really wildfire. It's got nothing to do with cyber, but communication, PR, we have to look at other dynamics. So how is social media, how do you recommend, manage, not control, but manage social media? Because, anybody could say anything, even anonymously. Could you give us some tips on, what and how to manage that?
I'll give you an example. When COVID was still new, and any business or organization that had a case of COVID became a news story. So this is when the pandemic was still being learned about, and there was a lot of hype around any cases. We helped manage some of those media storms. And what we did was we did social media listening, where we would audit what was being said on social media. Because while we needed to answer journalists' questions, we wanted to also communicate what the general community needed to hear, which was not always the same as what the media was reporting. And that's where you see a lot of negative assumptions and incorrect things being spread. It's going to be on social media, and it moves fast, as you say. So we did a lot of listening to look at what was being said, what's needing to be corrected, and we made sure we responded really quickly to that through the media, because they would see that, as well as using all of the social media channels that were owned by those organizations to put out very rapid information. So we made a promise to their customers through their brand on their channels. You will be the first to hear about updates. We will continue to update you. If you've got questions, come to us, don't speculate. And because updates were being given sometimes every 5 minutes, that helped reduce that spiral of chaos and the rumour mill, and brought people to the source of information, which was their Facebook page, their LinkedIn page, their Twitter account, or whatever. Or their website. In some cases, it's big enough to warrant its own web page.
So that's a very important and a very pertinent point, because there was a breach about 3-4 years ago. It was a massive global organization. What happened post-breach, there were these quote-unquote criminal agents, actors, who were going and creating lookalike websites saying, if you are a victim of this data breach, put in your information here, and also social media handles, which looked like the company is saying, okay, for people who've been impacted by, it's like when floods happen and when disasters happen, there are rogue agencies who are trying to collect donations in the name of the flood. I've seen this happen quite a bit. In fact, we tell our clients that in preparedness for a breach, also start actually buying domain names and social media handles, which is kind of a lookalike of your company name, right? So in case it happens, at least you own all those domains, and somebody is not using that up to put false information and then cause further damage, right? On top of whatever actually legitimately happened.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why it's important to have a good communication flow before something goes wrong, so they already have the connection with the correct site, with the correct channels, with the correct phone number, and so on. For bigger corporations or those that are going to have a bigger flow-on effect when something goes wrong, we create what's called a dark site, which is a website that's hidden, so that we can just flick a switch, tweak it slightly to be appropriate to the situation, and it's ready with the view being that we can then move faster than the negative sites or the misconceptions.
Correct. And I've also seen organizations incorporate global email signatures, which will say if you've been infected, click here. So staff, when they're communicating, that additional signature goes as a top up to communication. So if people are not across the news, and you have customers receiving emails, they can at least click on the link. But I think it all boils down to the proactiveness, right? You know, you could do anything reactive, right? You know, there's a storm today, and then, you know, it causes a bit of disruption. You could reactively go and do something after the storm, or you could plan before the storm by looking at the weather and, you know, not doing things which could impact you in a storm situation. So I think that proactiveness, and it's like the whole purpose of this knowledge series is to educate our audience on the fact that don't take PR and communication lightly. While some organizations are investing in cyber, but cybersecurity is all encompassing, right? You know, it's people, systems, processes. And when it comes to people, it's internal people, external people, shareholders, partners, you know, extended teams, even third and fourth party providers who are part of your value chain or your supply chain, who are working with your organization to make it successful. So I think that's the core element, right? So Phoebe, just, you know, going a little bit further in terms of, you know, what would you say would be the, you know, top 4 or 5 mistakes organizations make, right, when it comes to a crisis situation? And obviously, what are the top 4 and 5 they could do to mitigate? You kind of answered it in different ways, but we'll kind of structure it into, you know, 3 or 4 bullet pointed, you know, kind of things.
Well, you said one of them already, which is they try and sweep it under the rug. So the question you need to constantly ask yourself is, if I don't proactively share this information, are they going to find out anyway? If there is a chance that they will, then you want to be the one that's putting it out there, because then you're in control, you're proactive, which people respect, and you can say it the way that you want it said. Secondly, think about how other people are going to interpret it and the questions that they might answer, and then amplify that with the sense of fear and panic that people tend to bring to things like this, because that removes a little bit of logic and it exacerbates any concerns that people would have, and then address those. So often businesses will speak in a very clinical way and they will just give a small amount of information. But actually, if you speak with empathy and address questions before they have to ask them, for example, what does this mean for me? What are you doing about it? Even saying, we don't have all these answers yet, but we know that you will want to know the following things. We will let you know soon. That abates a lot of concern, because they trust that you are understanding how it impacts them, and they trust that you are thinking of all the things that need to happen. That makes a very big difference. And the third would be not preparing beforehand, obviously. But in preparing, it's making sure that you communicate that plan to the right people as well. Sometimes this will be put in the drawer of one staff member's remit and not actually shared amongst the team. This is the sort of thing that should be communicated well. Some businesses even do drills with, to make sure that it runs smooth and that you can be calm when you have a crisis.
Like that's how important. We have fire drills.
Drills, like you have
we do cyber drills. You're saying we should have also communication drills.
Absolutely.
Because as part of cyber drills, communication will become one key element. As part of that, can't sit separate, or it's not after the fact. It's part of the journey of the whole cyber security maturity of an organization, to ensure that communication, both internal and external, is very powerful. Very cool.
And probably the other mistake is having a contagious chaos. So internally, you might be panicking a bit, even though you've prepared. That it's concerning, and there are a lot of unknowns, and unknowns cause fear. But you can't allow that to be contagious. You need to show that you prepared for this beforehand. Communicate that you have, because that reassures people. Make sure that you speak with confidence and authority. Say what you know. Explain the things that you don't know, but assure them that you will soon. And then you're in control, and that's very contagious. That's what you want people to catch from you, not chaos and concern and alarm, because they will pick up on that and amplify it. And that just causes more problems, and it slows down the process of repair that you need as well. Well,
and you kind of answered the solution to the problem too in what you said, right? But what are the best practices, right? What are the 3 or 4 best practices organizations can take away from this conversation in terms of preparing for their cyber incident response, PR and communication, please?
Be kind to the media.
Okay.
You may be annoyed that they've picked up the story and they're going to make it a bigger one than it would have been otherwise. But equally, you can work with the media to have the truth put out there and put out there in a calm way. So you want them to be on your side and you want to be on their side when they're coming to you to report on
But
this
there's
story.
this misconception about the media that, you know, they will put out something which is juicy and hot and which will get a lot of...
And they might.
Yeah.
But so that's why you need to work with them, because you want them to do it on your terms as much as possible. So don't say no comment, because they will just fill in the blanks. Again, it's that question, are they going to find out about this or write about it without my help? Well, if they are, then I need to give them my help so that I have more control over this.
So no comment is not a good idea, is it?
It is not a good idea. No comment, or I just found out about this myself. I don't know. Hold on, things are crazy. Let me talk to you later. That's the lead there. Things are crazy. That's the headline. That's why you want to make sure that your receptionist has a sheet of what to do when a journalist calls, next to their phone even. How to answer them and take a message without giving a comment, without meaning to, that your staff have that. That's part of the preparation. So
yeah, but I've seen senior leaders struggle with this. Leave apart, we're talking about receptionists, you know, that's down the chain in an organization.
They're the gatekeeper.
They're the gatekeeper.
If it makes its way to the boss, they've got to know how to handle it well too. Because if you want to live beyond this and this not be what defines your business, it's going to live in your search engine results. It's going to live in people's memories. It's going to be on social media. If you want to recover well from this, you want to have the opportunity to have a good follow-up story with that journalist later. You want to have the opportunity to have your comments included in the piece. And if it's a really big story with a large number of people affected, it's actually a very useful tool to communicate to a large volume of people who have different communication methods. There are going to be some people that won't Google or use the internet, but they read the newspaper. And if they're impacted by the breach, reading that story is actually really helpful. So they can actually be a useful channel, not just a threat. So be kind to journalists. Yeah.
So would you provide in a scenario training and coaching to, you know, the face of the businesses, like people who will interact with the media? Do you do?
Yes.
Is that necessary? Do you think it's even required?
So media training is important, not to make you speak like a robot or a politician, but just how to handle those situations well. But we'll even be the spokesperson for a client. So often when you read a story, when it says a spokesperson said, that's often the PR person.
But one thing I picked up in your conversation about the word empathy, right? I think a lot of businesses want to keep it cut and dry, but businesses are working with human beings, people, right? Even if it's B2B, there are people on the other side, right? If there's no empathy, you know, there is no connection, and there's no connection, there's no relationship, and then there's all this, you know, you did this and it's like finger pointing kind of game. Yeah.
Empathy is really important for building trust, for reassuring them, for working on the relationship, because you need to continue that after this. Also, the misconception is that if you keep it short and, as you said, cut and dry, that it shuts the story down. It doesn't. It just leaves people with more questions.
Because people are curious. They want to know, that doesn't sound right. I want to find out more. And then they'll start snooping around and asking more questions and calling somebody in the staff, you know, trying to, and that's what media does, because when they don't get the right answer, they go into investigative mode, and then they try to, you know, seek information from other sources, which you can't control, because they could say anything.
It could be, this is what people on Twitter are saying. They'll even use hashtags. If you roadblock them, they'll get it somewhere else. So work with them. Empathy is really, really important, and that you're going to have a much more favourable result and patience from them. Another mistake I see when it comes to cyber breaches is not being very clear in how it will impact the end user. If you're vague, then they're going to assume the worst when they didn't necessarily need to. So for example, there was a large international not-for-profit organisation that we were working with, and we came in after they tried to handle it themselves. So they'd already caused some damage. And part of the damage was that they sent out an email to their entire database that was really vague about a credit card breach. If you have made a contribution in the last, actually they didn't define the period either. If you have made a contribution, you may have been affected, when actually it was limited to one country, a certain period of time, and the credit card details may not have even been compromised, they just weren't sure. They really, if they handled it with more detail and provided the opportunity for people to have someone that they can contact for help, because that's really important, that they don't feel that they're met with silence. Then they wouldn't have had half their database unsubscribing and committing to never work with them again. That's what the outcome was.
Yeah, that's a very important, and not-for-profits is, a lot of people give their money because they care about the, the cause they're working towards. I've had, certain not-for-profits come and say, we need to have a cyber program, primarily because our donors, the larger ones, which are corporate, saying, if you have a data breach, our name is on your donor list and we don't want to be part of that, right? So I think, no business, big or small, is immune to a cyber attack, right? You have to think about not just your immediate customer, but the larger user base who will reflect on your business and say, okay, my money is sitting with you and you haven't done the right thing by me. And I think that relationship is extremely important, to maintain and keep up. Wow.
Those third-party suppliers that you use, it's not any fault of your own when something goes wrong, but it reflects on you.
Yeah, and also I've seen some organizations pointing fingers saying, oh, it is not us, it's our third party. But you appointed them to do work, just don't put them under the bus, right? It could be cost because of them, but you're finally accountable, right? For whatever you have done, and your customer was not part of that journey of choosing that third-party provider.
Their relationship was with you, not them, so you have to fix it now.
And I've seen some government organizations very, very conveniently say, oh, it's one of those big four IT firms who did this. And I'm like,
they should have known
don't
better.
throw everybody under the bus. And it's very unfair in that process. Unless they want to be part of that communication, bring them along in the journey and saying, we're working with our third party, we understand the breach. I think this is what I have experienced in the last 16 years, seeing different types of communications during a crisis, especially cyber, which is my field.
But what they're saying when they say that, though, this is how the customer hears it, is, well, goodness, what other suppliers that you work with can I not trust? And do you care that little about me as a customer? I can't trust you about anything else now. I just feel like a commodity to you that doesn't matter. You seem like you don't care that this has happened to me. And that causes damage outside of that area of the business.
You touched upon a point when you said, especially cyber crisis, it's so important. Like if there's a flood or a tornado, human eye has something to relate to, saying, oh wow, that building is underwater, or that suburb is underwater. You can relate to it. With cyber crisis and cyber breaches, it's people's information, right? So a lot of people can't relate to the impact, and they'll start making all these assumptions. So it's more important to explain what the impact of a breach is, because there's nothing to the physical eye to see. Saying, oh, because of this data breach, that building fell over. No, there's no building fallen over. It's information lost, which could have an impact, which many people haven't experienced the journey. I think that's something very, very critical in the whole journey of explaining and taking accountability to explain what the breach really meant.
This is what it means.
The impact, the exposure, what it really meant to the business.
Exactly. This is what you should do about it. This is what we are doing, and this is when you'll hear from us again on it, so that they don't harass you. They know that more information's coming.
Beautiful, beautiful. Phoebe, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
My
It was
pleasure.
great, and I hope our audience get value out of this conversation, and we'll put your contact details if anyone wants to reach out and get some more information of you.
Sure, thank you.
But yeah, really happy, and thanks once again. I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Ajay.
See you guys. Bye.